I am Kurt Tillmans. I'm the game director on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. I work with Iron Galaxy. So when we think about just broadly the philosophy for coming up with a new Tony Hawk level, we kind of split it into two main categories. There are forbidden places and fantastic spaces. The former is something that's more about, being in a real world environment that a skater would just love to go and skate in. So sometimes that's a skate park, and it's not quite so forbidden, but like sometimes it's, a closed down water park or sneaking into the back lot of a movie studio during a shooting or something like that, right? So these places that might have really cool opportunities to skate in, a skater would love to trick off of all the stuff that's there, but normally it's not something that they're necessarily allowed to do. So, that's where the forbidden spaces come from. And that was, one of the genesis of water park and movie studio, is trying to think about places like that. Where would like a skater fantasize about skating about? They may not normally be able to do so. We have a lot of brainstorming sessions first where we kind of come up with ideas about, places that, again, we think would be fun to skate in. We do a lot of research. So we go to the YouTubes and we check out places that, maybe skaters in real life have gone and skated in that are, shut down after hours, things like that, that look really cool and haven't been represented in the Tony Hawk games yet, right? So that's a huge inspiration for us. Like a lot of times it really does come from real life. It's just, hey, this is actually water park is a good example where it's like, there's a lot of awesome videos out there of skaters, even having permission to go into a water park after hours and stuff like that, and just skating around. And that's where the funnel slide came from in the water park and stuff like that, right? Is there's actual videos of that stuff out there. The pros themselves, the skaters themselves, continuing to do these kind of crazy things, using their own imaginations to go to these places and figure out how to trick off of them. That's a huge inspiration for us. And then if we see something like that, we might be like, oh, that's a no-brainer, right? Like something like that, where it's like, that's really easy. We started looking at things that were in Southern California, right? Kind of where a lot of the skateboarding actually happens in the Southern California settings. And what's just very uniquely SoCal that hasn't been done yet. We just kind of jotted down a bunch of locations and things like that. And then we just start drilling in on each one. So okay, well, if we did another kind of beach thing, what hasn't been done for a beach thing? Boats or whatever. Okay, we kind of have a cruise ship, maybe not, right? Then we kind of dig in on each one of those. And then it's we open up some photos of movie studios and it's oh, well, we got golf carts and tracks and trailers and all these interesting things. And then when we started talking about oh, we could actually build sets, right? Art direct sets and create interesting things to trick off of that may not necessarily be part of every movie studio, but would be at home in our own created movie studio. We had a lot of fun talking about that. And then of course when we settle on something like movie studio, we just start thinking about all the awesome objects that people could trick off of, right? There's grinding on the dolly tracks, and there's getting up on the cranes, and all of getting up into the upper areas where all the soundproofing is and the roof and all that kind of stuff, right? So, and then of course try to think up an actual movie set. So we had a lot of brainstorming sessions about what kind of movie is being filmed on this set, and can we create cool narrative stories around that. The fantasy is not that you're skating in the set of your favorite movie. It's that you're sneaking into the back lot of a movie studio. It is interesting because the architecture of Tony Hawk levels, we don't really think about it like real world architecture. We call it Tony Hawk architecture. When you look at a building in the real world, you start thinking about what would I have to do to this building to make it skatable in a Tony Hawk world, right? There are very few solid walls, pillars that go from the ceiling to the ground. The bottom of a pillar is always a quarter pipe, right? That kind of stuff. So you start looking around the world and you're just boy, there's a lot of sharp edges around here. All this stuff would be a ramp or a quarter pipe or something like that. So it's almost reverse engineering thing. So that's one of the ways that it's definitely changed how we look at architecture. The trick, no pun intended, is just to make sure that no matter what direction the player chooses to go in, they always have opportunities to do something cool. Right, so especially some of the big goals in the game, movie studio especially, is getting a score run, right? Like you're meant to, score pretty well in like the competition, and then like, beat all the other skaters and stuff like that, right? So like the best way to do that is, well, okay, if I go right, I've got a trick line that I can be successful and I can break off a high combo doing that. If I go left, if I go to the second level, whatever it is. And that is, we really kind of break the park up into these like discrete sections, right? So like the starting area, the right area, the forward area, the interior, the upper area, those were all places where it's like, hey, each of these we kind of have to think of as their own mini level in a way, make sure that they're all fun, that the player can like get great combos in there, and that they transition into the other areas of the level seamlessly so skilled players can continue a combo into those areas. When we showed Tony Hawk the water park for the first time, and he's playing it for the first time, and he is skating in there, he goes to the funnel and he goes through the loop and keeps skating down. And then he looks at us and he's like, I've actually skated that. And we go, yeah, man, we know. Like we saw. So it's like when there's like real world reference for some of this stuff, and like players will have seen that, skaters might have skated it. Like they have already this like picture in their head of like, oh, what it would be like to skate in a water park where they've seen it. So I think that's like a level of scrutiny that you don't get in the fantastical stuff as much. So I would say the forbidden stuff is it has a different level of scrutiny to it. Tony is heavily involved. I mean, he wants to make sure that they fit the vibe of the franchise, right? So he totally gets the forbidden and fantastic stuff, right? When we first told him about pinball, he was just like, oh yeah, that fits right in with like Roswell and Skater Heaven, right? He knows the franchise super well. So, we pitch stuff like that. And those are the moments when you've kind of hit on something, right? Where you're like, hey, what about a pinball? Like, it sounds insane, right? Then when you tell Tony that, he's like, oh no, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Then you've really hit on a good idea. So yeah, he's super involved in that. He's part of the brainstorming process early on. We then usually spend a good amount of time building something, and he gets builds at pretty frequent paces and play tests them and lets us know how he feels about them. And he's a great collaborator on that stuff. When we came up with like water park or movie studio, again, we were not only looking for like a location that hasn't been done before, but we're looking for skating opportunities that the player hasn't had before, right? Like being able to skate down a water slide and actually like, vert back and forth on the slide as you're going down. Like that's just not something that exists in any other park, right? And like movie studio, very similarly, we have this idea of like the dolly track and the verticality and things like that connect. We have a very interesting like secret hidden area in the movie studio as well that like takes you back, like it connects to the verticality options in that park. And so our philosophy at the start was really trying to be like, we should treat this like we found a GDD from Neversoft, right? And it's like, here are all of their ideas for levels that they never got a chance to build. And, how would they approach it and all that kind of stuff. So like, that was really like our philosophy from the start. Now that people are actually starting to play it, one thing we hear a lot when they play like movie studio or water park, they're like, boy, that was a lot of fun. I don't remember playing that in the original. And we get to go like, yeah, that's ours. So that's like the highest compliment when people cannot distinguish that it's actually a new park. You need to have people on your team that have almost like an encyclopedic knowledge of everything that's been done in the past, right? It's like, you really don't want to like retread anything and say like, this is brand new when it's not, obviously. So when we talk about like every park having its own kind of gameplay identity, you also have to go back into the archives and be like, cool, like, is this actually a new thing? And are we giving players new opportunities here? And one thing we found is that like we really do feel like there's still a lot of room for that in the franchise, right? There's a lot of cool ideas. I mean, really, it's limitless, right? Like human creativity is limitless. So like I think there's still a lot of opportunities for great Tony Hawk gameplay.